call to order, the statement, and the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll do those, and then by then maybe he'll be here. So, okay, calling the meeting to order. I'll read the statement on remote participation pursuant of Section 7E of Open Meetings Act on agenda. Pursuant to Section 7E on the Open Meetings Act, I, as president of the McHenry County Conservation District, have determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent at this time because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and Governor Pritzker's related disaster declaration. I have further determined that the physical presence of an employee or member of the public body at the regular meeting location is not feasible due to the disaster described in the governor's declaration. That being stated, we will then move on. I'll lead in the Pledge of Allegiance. So for that, I pledge allegiance
to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
stands, one nation,
under
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Introductory roll call.
Trustee Thomas.
Present.
Trustee Brandt.
Here.
Trustee Fritz.
Here.
Trustee Dom. I don't think he's here yet. Trustee Campbell.
Here.
Trustee Cook.
Yes.
Trustee Henning.
Present. Thank you. 6 present and 1 hopeful. Okay. Public comments. Do we have anyone that would like to open the meeting with a comment?
I don't see anything.
Okay, we'll move on from there then. Under new business, a review of the January 19th regular meeting agendas. Is there anyone that has anything that they'd like to discuss from the meeting we have coming up on Tuesday? Any trustees, anyone?
Nope.
Okay, we're gonna move on to 5.2 is presentation of the, yes?
If I can make one statement. So on the consent agenda, under 12.7, we had resolution 2103 authorizing the execution of an agreement with Boulder Ridge. We are going to request that this be removed from the consent agenda and then that this item be tabled. And then it is our intent that we will have this back in front of you in February.
Okay.
If someone just can note that and pull it off the consent agenda on Tuesday night, that would be great.
Okay. Yes, because we're not ready for that yet. Okay, that'll be good. Fine. Thank you.
Hey, John, I just thought of something. I was going to pull something off the consent agenda for just a comment, so I'll just do it now.
Okay.
Under the Treasury report for December 31st, 2020, for my 10 years, I have seen the 4.3 million for pitching. And it's still odd for me to look at that report and not see the pitching debt listed. So it's just a comment.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to see a bill taken away at least, isn't it?
Yepper. So good deal. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, then we will move on. We're gonna move on to Andy's gonna do the tentative budget. I think he's got a speeded up version because of everyone, as far as trustees, have seen it. Now, if there's anyone else, staff or public or whoever, when he's done, we can ask questions and he will back up to a larger presentation. I think he's got it down to like 10 slides or something like that. And but he has more available if need be. So
by the way, hey Chris, how you doing?
Do we have Chris here now?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Elizabeth,
Yes,
did you edit it down at all or no?
I did not. No, I sent you an email back saying 10 is where we were. No more than 10.
So good news, bad news. The good news is it's supposed to be 10. Bad news is it's a little bit longer, but I will move quickly through them. I see it as an opportunity. The last time we've been through a lot of this would have been back in November. The tentative budget hasn't changed really since then at all. But it'll kind of refresh some of these highlights in your mind as we start getting to, talking to the county, networking with those people, and obviously we'll be in front of the county in March to approve it. So feel free to interrupt me if you want me to move faster, and I will do that. otherwise, let me get this started.
Don't feel like you have to hurry too much,
Yeah.
Andy, because
You're doing fine, Andy.
this meeting does not look like it should take that long. So if you take whatever time you need.
Well, my joke was when Elizabeth said 4 to 5 slides, I thought she said 45 slides.
Oh,
Yeah.
Good one, Andy.
No.
All right, let's see here. Just gonna do a switcheroo. Everybody should be able to see that.
Yep.
Yes.
yes.
So I think we're all familiar with the 6 funds by now. The 3 in the green are the ones that are supported by property tax levies. So those are the only 3 I'm even going to talk about. Again, all the details for the other 3 funds are in the budget, and I would encourage everybody to look at them, public included. The only thing I have to say about the insurance fund is that we're going to we receive the tax levy of approximately $250-some thousand. It comes in as revenue. It's paid out in the 98% goes to Bederma for the district's commercial general liability needs. With that said, in July, when we were doing the budget levy planning, we presented a very rough draft of the tentative budget at that time. It projected a $346,000 deficit based on the known revenue reductions that we had. And then when we presented the actual tentative budget draft version in in November, you could see we were very close to those July numbers. And this second column showing a deficit of $338,000, that went unchanged from November to today, the budget that you'll be approving Tuesday. So the only thing we changed were some capital outlays, and those would fall below this line item we're looking at. Quickly going over the revenues, 82% of the district's operating revenue comes from property taxes. The other big source is the farm lease rents, 12%. Collectively, that's 94% of the district's operating revenue. That's been the same for the last decade plus. It's relatively unchanged. The good thing is it's very stable, obviously, especially through something like the pandemic that a lot of other entities are struggling with. The bad news is we don't have a lot of other options. The conservation district tax is very limited. We don't have the flexibility for the other revenue sources and tax revenues that are available to municipalities and even some other open space agencies. So you can see, going all the way back to 2010, property taxes averaging 82%, that farm lease anywhere from 10 to 12%. Should be very familiar now with the PTEL levy that the board issued in September of 20. A total increase of $221,000 was what was available to us, and that's actually what the levy was issued for. And then the consensus by the board, the direction was to abate the $181,000 from the inflationary increase of CPI. So the 22 budget's built just using this $40,000 of a new development levy. Again, this is the levy amount. The budgeted revenue is a little bit less than that because we won't collect all of that. That's what's driving that $338,000 operating deficit. It's the first time probably in a decade where the district's projecting an operating deficit without considering capital. And this history of the general fund levy shows why we're in that situation. And as you can see, if you look back from 2011 through 2020, there's only been 3 times where the district's been able to effectively capture that PTEL increase. One of those in 2018, I highlight here in light green. That's because although we were allowed to increase it, as everybody's too familiar with, we had to turn around and reduce the 19 levy by the amount of that increase. Again, albeit we were allowed to keep a small amount of new development. So really it's a relatively flat levy. And the reality is, as we're looking at this tentative budget, this would have represented the 4th consecutive year in a row where basically we're dealing with a neutral budget, because we had a neutral levy in 17 and then again all the way through 20 with small increases for new developments, which don't help us very much at all. The average increase over that is 0.5%. We looked at this on Tuesday. We showed the total property tax revenues taken in from 2012 to 20 of $69 million. Had we taken everything that was available to us under PTEL, we would have collected $76 million. or an additional $6.5 million in property taxes. And again, the more important, factor there is that we would have an additional annual levy capacity of $1.3 million. Now, what we talked about Tuesday is not abating that PTEL amount. And I wanted to make sure we talk about this because we're approving this tentative budget where this changes have been made, but this change will then go into the final budget. So if anybody's looking at this, I just want to make sure we're being fully transparent here. So we're abating the 181. We're not abating the 181 on the PTEL. We're going to collect the full $221,000 into the general fund operating levy. And then as we know, we're going to offset that with the abatement of the debt service. So interestingly, the tentative budget that we're talking about right now that you approved Tuesday will have a PTEL levy that only includes that 40 from new development. It includes the full debt service levy. So your total P-taxes levy in this tentative budget right now are $20,485,000. When we make this change, we're actually going to bring in 181,000 of additional PTEL because this number right now includes the 40,000. We're going to abate the full debt service at 221. So the final budget will actually incorporate $40,000 less of property tax revenue total than the tentative budget. Hope everybody follows that. And then if I adjust this schedule we just looked at for the increased PTEL property tax revenue, we see it go from 69 to 6.3 million, but still a loss obviously of $1.1 million on an annual basis of lost capacity. And then that average goes up to about 0.8% versus over 2%. A little bit of good news, we haven't looked at this in a bit, but it shows the median home values through September of 2020, according to the Illinois Realtors Association. And the median for the year is 238. So a very surprising increase. Everybody's been aware of it probably since June or July. It wasn't barely 6 months ago when I was in front of the board as this COVID hit saying, hey, we better be thinking what would happen if these medium homes start to crash, and the Iapd follows it, in the next 2 or 3 years. And obviously nothing even close to that happened. The actual median for the third quarter, median McHenry County homes, is $250,000. So that 238 is the year-to-date median. So it starts with that lower number in January, takes it all the way to 250. And my guess is then the year-to-date will be a little bit less than that because typically sales will fall in the last quarter, but still a very strong growth. Collectively, when you take that high growth of the home values, and that's been happening for the last, 9 years now, and you take the very conservative property tax that the district has, where we've had neutral and even years of declining, we see this declining tax rate, a very steep decline going all the way back to 2014. And when I show this, I can't help but then show as we look out to 2025, the last time we'll levy for the outstanding bonds. In 2026, that levy will go to zero. It's a 60% reduction in property taxes when you look at the total taxes issued by the district. Looking at a couple of the non-tax revenues, alternative revenue sources within the general fund, we had a July forecast for corn when we first did the first look at the budget of 370. Then we came and introduced 390 into that November presentation. When we brought it in front of the board, by then the December 21 corn had moved to 406. So as of November 17th, around the time we were presenting that first draft of the budget, corn was at 406. We'd only incorporated 390 into that November draft. Yesterday, corn settled at 453. The December 21 future settled at 453. That's an additional $140,000 of revenue. So if you take that and you add that additional PTEL, getting pretty close to a balanced operating budget, not considering capital. A very nice windfall. We'll see if it holds out. Obviously, there's a lot of.
Hey, Andy, do we?
Go ahead.
Hey, Andy, as a district, are we allowed to sell corn or buy corn on the futures?
No, I would no. I mean, not as an investment. Is that what you're suggesting, John?
Well, I'm just saying that you could go in and lock these prices in if you by taking a position on the board, and then if things moved, you. That's what farmers do to lock in
Yeah, I know,
costs, things like that. And I was wondering if we, I figured I knew the answer to this, but
It's
Well, I
called
don't- I mean,
speculation.
Can't do
I've
that.
never asked the question. I
We
don't
did
know
ask-
for
We did
sure.
ask the question about futures and whether we could do that, and council had said no, right? Do you recall that? That's going back several years ago. with,
Myself,
Yeah,
I
we
don't,
did
I don't
ask.
recall it.
It was
It's,
asked. It was asked.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you're correct. It was discussed. I remember the terms of put and something like that, and it was
O'Donnell
just,
was on, and we did have that conversation back, it goes back a
I
while.
don't think that was in relation to corn futures, but I could be wrong.
maybe you'd know better than I would.
You would
I
know.
didn't know if you had an opportunity, if you saw a price that you really liked, if you had an opportunity to go in and lock that price in and take a position so that we would lock those dollars in.
Yeah, I'm about 95% confident you could do it, but we could double check, and maybe we already have the answers Elizabeth's suggesting. It might already exist. It sounds
I
like.
guess I'm not clear what you're asking, John. This is just the price we get for crops, for rental, or that's
Right.
currently based on that. I don't get, we don't own any corn. How can we lock in a price?
We're really getting paid in corn. We are, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but because I think I know the answer, but what I'm saying is, Dave, we get so many bushel per acre on all these leases. So so we basically are getting so many thousands of bushels of corn, and the farmer ends up paying us for the dollars. Well, if we see corn go to 453 like this, and we think it could fall to $4, we could sell our corn at 453. If it goes higher, the farmers would pay us the extra, and we'd lose out. If the price goes down, we'd have that price locked in. So we'd have it. So say it went to 403, if we locked it in, we'd have made 50 cents a bushel on that corn that we were going to get from those farmers, and we could lock this extra $140,000 in today versus taking the chance of the price going down.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So anyway, I don't think that we legally could do that, but it's
Really interesting idea.
it would definitely give us a chance to lock in this windfall that we have sitting there right now that we won't be able to realize until the price of corn, I think March 1st is when it stops fluctuating for us. So we are riding that market for the next 6 weeks, where if we wanted to lock it in now, if we had that ability, we'd be able to lock these dollars in. But anyway, I don't think we can do it. I'd be surprised if we could. But anyway, continue on. Sorry, Andy.
Yep, no problem. And then just from a historical perspective, you can see that 450s, you have to go all the way back to 2014 to see corn at that level. So the last 6 years, it's been right around $4 a bushel. Looking at the interest rates, again, we all know they're down, or a loss of about 42% in interest revenue, or $68,000 for fiscal year 22. We have a little bit of protection in that we have an investment portfolio of about $5.5 million of CDs. The average maturity is 2 years. So, but those will run off, almost half of them in fiscal year 22, and then most of the rest of it by 23. And there's probably another 20% of that that have a longer term, 3 or 4 years. So we'll get hard in fiscal year 23, even harder than we're hit in 22, unless rates recover quickly. Program and user fees, like many municipalities, open space agencies, we were hit very hard by the pandemic. Obviously, all the educational program opportunities, got reduced drastically. Our creative education staff, they're doing everything they can, and they're pretty confident that they're going to drive those programmatic revenues back up to the level we had here back in 2018 for 22. So hopefully that'll take place. That's it on the revenue side. Quickly on the expense side, the personnel we see going up year over year, 3.8%. And we see the total personnel as a percentage of total operating expenses going up slightly from 77.1 to 78.1%. And then to touch on the wages, increasing 3.1%, just to go back and revisit how we got to that 3.1%. So in the 22 budget, there is 2% for all non-contractual, non-bargaining employees. That does include the 150 union members. Their contract aligns them with the wages and compensation for other non-bargaining staff. There's also a 2% salary grade increase whereby just the ranges are moving. That doesn't necessarily do anything for anybody, any existing employees today. The 4-7 costs, where we look to see if somebody's not at the average by the time they hit their 7-year anniversary. Total cost is estimated at $17,000. We're about 1/3 of 1% year over year. And then we're taking that part-time agricultural services coordinator to a full-time agriculture ecologist. And the additional wage cost there is estimated at $30,000. That represents about 0.5%. So between just these two items, that's almost 1%. So if you add that 1 onto 2, you're getting pretty close to that 3.1% increase year over year. Seasonals are going up from 11 to 12 to meet the Illinois state minimum laws. There is no budgeted increase there in that we told the managers they had to absorb that increase. So they either reduce the total season hours to offset that, or they do reduce some other line item to hold that cost neutral. For the FOP, their contract expired March 31st of 20. We're getting in the final stages. Hope we have a contract agreement here soon in front of you the next 30, 60 days. It does include a 2% annual wage increase. It's a new matrix, 10-year adjustments, anniversary adjustments, somewhat like the 4-7. It also increases the starting wage. Their matrix was put in place on April 1st of 17. It hasn't been changed since. Obviously, every year, all the non-bargaining compensation grades have been moved up on an annual basis. Additionally, they're shifting from 3 full-time sergeants to 2. And then we're shifting from 7 full-time patrol officers to 8. So again, total officers 10 and 10, that's not changing. That is 1 less from the 2020 fiscal year. And the net wage savings there is $15,000. So when we take the estimated increases from the new matrix that'll go into effect here hopefully soon, and we subtract out the net savings from that change, we're estimating a total wage cost increase of $24,000, or about 0.5%. Then the other one just to touch on is the insurance. We know we moved to the IPVC, and we're going to experience an 8.9% rate increase. That's fixed though for 18 months. So when you annualize that out, it's about 6% annualized. That compares very well to the Blue Cross Blue Shield renewal rates. They quoted a 17%. In addition, we have 4 additional employees on the plan for budgeted fiscal year 22 versus what was in the budget for fiscal year 21 and other plan changes. So we did very well moving when we moved, or we would have had to try to mitigate that 17% increase from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Touching on the non-personnel, non-capital expenditures, so these would be the contractuals and commodities. We show them increasing 2% year over year, or $40,000. Again, that's against a inflationary growth rate of 2.3% in the prior year. This would be the 11th consecutive year we've told the managers your budgets are frozen and/or we've reduced them, and they've had to absorb all the inflationary increase associated with that. So effectively, they reduced the budgets by 20%. And just to give some perspective to that, if we had taken the fiscal year 2012 other operating expenditures and grew them under inflation, you would see the green bar. So they would grow from to the 2.37 all the way to 2.78 million. Instead, what we have in the blue bar is the actual budgeted amount of those other operating expenses. And you can see instead of going up, they're going down. And by the time we get out here to fiscal year 22, represents about a $750,000 in savings. And that's how we've been able to kind of offset that slow to no revenue growth against personnel expenses increasing. Touching on the capital outlays, this year I'm showing the last 3 years, budget year, fiscal year 20 and 21 and 22. And again, as those levies in 18, we had a levy increase, and that drove that 20 budget. And so we had $314,000 of capital funded from revenue. And then in 19, driving the 21 budget, we had to reduce that. And now we're dealing in this budget, prior to the abatement change, would represent the 4th consecutive year of almost a neutral levy. So there's no capital funded from revenue. So then we look at the capital being funded from reserves in comparison for the 3 years. And obviously, if the revenue's not there, then all the capital is coming out of reserves. And in total, look at the 3 years, and it's pretty similar. It's up a little bit year over year, but we're averaging right around $400,000 in capital if you look back over the last several years. Which brings us to this last capital slide. So this shows the capital going back to budget from fiscal year 13 through 22. And that green bar shows how much we're able to afford from operating revenues. And again, as you see those lower amounts, those correspond with reduced levies and or flat levies. And then obviously when the green bar is low, when the revenue's low, then you're going to see the spikes in the reserve funding of it. And again, as you look at the total capital, that's averaging about $385,000 a year. Just to quickly touch on the debt service, just a couple more slides and we will be done. In 2001, the district issued $68.5 million of general obligation bonds, and in 2007, another $73 million. Those are referendum approved bonds. Both of them had very restricted limited use for land acquisition, site and trail improvements, and the protection and restoration of natural habitats. 2014, the remaining bonds were refinanced, generated a $14.1 million savings over the life of the bonds. As of March 31st, 2021, so we're going to make our payment for the bonds in February this year. That'll bring the outstanding GO bonds down to $67.5 million. And then we have the additional debt certificates outstanding at $2.38 million. Quick look at the debt retirement schedule. Again, the big thing here is you get out to 2025, it's $14.1 million of total GO bond levy. You go to the next year, it's zero. So a 60% reduction. It's going to position the district very nicely. A couple, just two new slides we haven't really looked at. So this is the summary of all the funds, fiscal year 22 budget, year over year in comparison. And we can see the total, hopefully I highlighted here, total budgets for all funds going down $1.3 million year over year. So from 27 million to 25.6 million, or a 5.2% reduction. And that's really being driven by the debt service budget going down in 22. And the reason it's going down is because in the 21 budget, we included a $1.9 million pitch in, pay down, or pay off. And in fact, we did that. So that was done in 21. In 22, there is no $1.9 million. So that's a big reduction. And if you back that out, then you'd see a slight increase in year over year from funds. But year over year, again, a 5.2% overall budget reduction. And as we look at all the funds and the estimated reserve spend, that's this bottom line here, with the total general fund, $880,000, a lot of that capital, obviously. And as Trustee Cook talked about, I think back in December, you know, we are looking at a $1.7 million reserve spend. To put that in perspective, it sounds like a lot, but if you go back and look at the budgets for the last several years, I'm taking all the way back to 17, but you could go back further, it would look somewhat similar. That's the total reserve spend for all funds for all of those budget years. And you can see actually the $1.7 million is a little bit less in these other years. And if you look at that, you might say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It sounds like, you know, a big red flag and where's this headed? Well, the reality is a big portion of those reserve spends are happening within the camp fund, which is a capital fund. And that fund was established in 2010, and $4.5 million of non-restricted fund balance was set up into a new fund for it. There is no funding source from it. That's been known since 2010. And so basically you have the capital expenses within that fund, you know, that's a big expense, and there's very little revenue, if any, to offset that. So each year that's going to represent a net draw on total reserves. The other thing you'll see too is in these prior years, you know, the total budget was $1 to $1.3 million. As you get into the 21-22 budget, it's half of that. And we've talked about this in the past years. If we had a project, typically we put in the whole cost of that project into a fiscal year, even though maybe only one phase or two of three phases were going to get done and actually expended out in that budget year. Now we're trying to, the planning department, John, Amy, Perry, working very hard to try and really nail down what's actually going to get expended out this year. So that happened in 21-22, cuts that down quite a bit. The other piece of that, this is the general fund, then going all the way back to 17, we're showing reserve spend and all that. Some of this would be reappropriation. The rest of it would generally be capital expenditures budgeted to come out of reserves. The debt service is usually pretty even. We actually abated the debt service levy from the 2017 levy when we were taking a lot of pressure. So that levy was completely neutral year over year. And then again, you see a big reserve spend in this current year that we're in, and that's the $1.9 million that we had budgeted for the debt service payoff of the pitching loan. The last piece is the dedicated accounts. That's a capital fund as well. Again, so there's really, going back in time, there was a lot of money sitting in that came from large grants, land acquisition grants. They were really fueled by the general obligation bonds and having a lot of funding to work with, as well as the grants were more available. Those monies have been spent down until we are, where we are now is there really isn't any more money in the dedicated accounts. And that's why we've had to shift even some projects that would normally be budgeted in the dedicated to the camp fund, because there's really no more seed money to support those projects. The dollars you see here now for fiscal year 22, it's largely the land acquisition dollars that we have available. And obviously we're budgeting to spend it all so that we legally can, if we decide to do that. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Yep.
We'll open this up for comments or questions, and I mean for anybody that's out there, not just trustees, because this is an opportunity for anybody in the public to have a comment. So it's is there anybody out there who'd like to ask a question?
I don't,
Seeing anyone?
Bill's asking.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah, Andy, could you go back to that last slide? And can you just give us an approximate balance in those funds? If you wish to do it, a current balance or a balance, based on the 22 budget.
Yeah, this is it right here. So my estimate for the end of the 22 budget would be the general fund would be 2.1, and I'll qualify that. That doesn't include the 3.2 million of camp funding that's set aside. So in the general fund, it would be 2.1 plus the 3.2 million that's set aside for the camp. And then the rest of these are as is. The dedicated accounts, if we've budgeted to spend all the land acquisition dollars. If we do, then it would be zero. If we don't, there'll be some dollars in there. The debt service would show $423,000. That's because we're transferring, we haven't made it yet. This will happen in February. I was hoping to get it to you in January, but I didn't. We will need to transfer money from the dedicated accounts that's assigned to service the pitch and installment loan, which doesn't exist, as well as some general fund unrestricted reserves to make the interest payments on the debt certificates going forward. So that will happen. The camp fund, so that's why it's 423. It's actually going to increase a little bit. The camp fund, again, if we spend everything that's budgeted, that would be, I believe, 577. That should be enough then to fund the projects generally for the next fiscal year, 2023. We're spending about $500,000 a year. After fiscal year 23, you'd have to start looking to the fund balance in the general fund to fund fiscal years 24 and beyond within the camp. The Natural Resource Special Improvement Fund, 399, and Insurance Fund, 308. You'll see that we're budgeting a deficit in this insurance fund, and I went through this, I think, in November. I'm not taking the tax levy because, without getting into a lot of the detail, going back to where we had actually hit our statutory rate cap, the general fund created kind of a surplus over from 2014 to about 2017, and then we started to bring it down. So there's enough fund balance, and you can only use those dollars for risk management toward immunity purposes. They can't be used for anything else. So the idea right now is, while revenue's tight, that fund balance would support that insurance fund without a levy increase, for 5, 6, 7, maybe even more years.
The only thing that I find difficult to sometimes to get my head around is that there is that under the general fund, there are those camp funds, a couple of $1 million, I believe.
3.5.
And we recognize that they're there, but they don't show up, in a presentation like this.
They show up in all the financials. So if you look at your monthly financials, and you go to the general fund balance sheet, it calls it right out, 3.2 million or 3 million assigned to the camp fund.
Right.
I didn't show it here just because it kind of adds confusion, because those dollars really aren't available to the general fund. So just in this slide, I didn't show it, but most of the time when I show the general fund, I show those dollars and show them assigned to the camp.
Good. I mean, that would be my sort of preference. And when you present this to the county, well, I leave it to you, but I would favor having those numbers show up someplace in the presentation.
And on page 32 of the tentative budget document, the same schedule is there, and it is outlined right there in the material. So
Thank
So
you.
again, I just reduced the schedule down here just to make it a little easier to look at.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, could we go back and just, Andy, would you mind explaining about the $40,000 that when you abate the debt levy, that we lose that $40,000 from new growth? Would you
Thank you,
mind?
Carolyn. I didn't get it either, but I did just to say.
Let's see if I can do a better job of that.
No. I just wondering why that goes. So, thank you.
Sure. Switch this on. So in this, let me get my highlighter back. In this first line, the tentative budget that we created included $40,000 of new development. It didn't include the 181 because the board said we're going to abate that. We're not going to take it, right?
Right?
Got that. The total amount, so the 40,000 is already in the revenue in the tentative budget. The total amount we're going to abate is 221,257 because that represents the total amount of the PTEL increase. It's the 40 plus the 181, right? 181 is the inflation, the 40 is new development, so the total PTEL increase is 221.
Well, why do you have abatement at 181, 130?
40,000, say that again?
Why do you have right there on that slide down at the bottom, abatement of 181, 130?
Because in the tentative budget, that's what's incorporated into it right now, is an abatement of the PTEL of 181. Because we just came up with this other consensus on Tuesday, 2 days ago. So we haven't changed the tentative budget to show that.
Okay.
Correct.
So because this 40 is already in there, and we're gonna, basically we're gonna say, hey, you know what? We're gonna let you not just take 40, but you can take the whole 221. Well, the difference between the 40 I already have in the budget and the 221 that you're saying, we're saying we can have all of it is only 181. So the net gain to the tentative budget that you have right now is only $181,000 of additional revenue.
Of course. Okay, so I'm sorry. So that's because the 40 is already there. I thought it was taken out for some reason. I'm sorry.
So,
You're right. It's already built into the
it's
revenue.
It's confusing because then we're going to abate is that full 221.
Got it.
So,
No, that makes sense.
And so the other thing I was saying is that it's interesting that here we are, we're actually making a change that the district benefits by because the operational levy gains 181,000 of revenue, so to speak. But it's a gain to the taxpayer because where we sit right now in the tentative budget, we would levy $40,000 more than we're gonna, because we're gonna abate 221, and only take 181 kind of back, so to speak, if that makes sense. So the final budget will actually include $40,000 less of taxes than the tentative budget does. Because the tentative already includes the 40. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Fine. Thank you. Thanks, Carolyn.
Yeah. All right.
Anyone else? All right, I'm not hearing from anyone else, so I think we can move on. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, we're gonna go to a report on the outreach to newly elected officials. Elizabeth?
Well, do you want to talk first before I go into that with the meeting that we had in December with the chairman?
Yeah, that was a good meeting, and I thought we laid a little groundwork there, and I think now we need a follow-up now that we've and have you given any thought to the follow-up now that we're gonna abate on the debt side?
Yeah, I think we reach out, we set up a meeting and see if our liaison, Kelly, wants to join us, Wagner, and then we'll sit down and have that conversation.
Okay, well, it was a good meeting, and he uses our sites. It sounds like he enjoys everything. But on the other hand, when we asked about if we decided not to abate after we said we would, he didn't like that idea right off the bat. Although he wasn't as firm a no as we've gotten in the past, but it was still. And I could see where your very first year you don't want to have an increase anywhere, but it sounds like we could at least have a discussion going forward, and that he'd be receptive to having that discussion with us going forward, I guess. So anyway, is that what you took away from it?
Yes, actually, very, very good as far as appointment process, working through being on schedule, working myself with County Administrator Austin. We did ask about protocols on sharing of information, and agreeable that we share and send to him and share to all. And so good communication. So I thought it was a very good meeting and very good open dialogue.
Yes, it sounded like he was very open to us sending out information wherever we felt it was fit to do, and he wouldn't have a problem with the way our information was put out to the county board. So I was happy with that.
Next, and the other thing I was going to say with outreach, so as you know, we have a new liaison, Kelly Wagner. She's here again this evening, second meeting. So
Hey to Kelly.
Glad that she's
Good evening.
and being involved, and then liaison Bob Nowak. We did have correspondence exchanged, and again, I sent on to the Board of Trustees. He had expressed his appreciation for service. We did produce a resolution that will be given on Tuesday, so hopefully he will be able to join us so that we can honor him with that for his 4 years that he has spent with us as our liaison. So we appreciate that. I've also had an opportunity in the interim to meet, there's another new county board member, Tracy Von Bergen, and she is the liaison to visit McHenry County. And so we had been on a Zoom call, and then yesterday we had a strategic planning meeting with a subset group. And so I did get an opportunity to connect with her a little bit more on that, but that was great. So we'll continue to do outreach and would encourage board members as well, as we have many new faces to sit down and meet, and maybe try to schedule some type of meet and greet or get everybody familiar with the district. So,
well, Elizabeth, in the past, when we've tried to do that, we did have trustees pick some names and on a list, so we get them all done. There's 4 of us now from District 6, so we could really get our 4 county board representatives contacted, but so maybe we could do that and see if trustees want to meet somebody outside their district, and I would be willing.
That would be great. That would be great. And we can do it, if there's an uncomfortableness of doing it in person, we could arrange a Zoom meeting, but we could also do some smaller meetings to get a feel for that. So how would you like me just to send something out to board members and kind of
we can put our name against something, or a name that we'll contact. And I don't have a problem with picking up the phone and calling them and just saying hi, introducing myself. I don't have a problem with that either. Doesn't have to be Zoom, just a phone call.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that too. And I don't mind. I don't mind going outside of my district either. I mean,
Me neither.
We've
I
got,
can make a fool of myself wherever I'm at.
yeah, it doesn't matter.
If
So
you
yeah,
guys
I'm
need any,
perfectly open.
sorry, Lynn, if you guys need any help reaching out to them, let me know. I can do that also.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Something for us to work on then. Okay. Anyone else? You have anything else on that, Elizabeth?
Not on elected officials. I'll do a legislative report on Tuesday night.
Okay. All right. Iapd board self-evaluation. We're having some trouble getting some dates put together there, but you've got some options for us tonight. Is that right?
That is correct. So March, I had thrown out to Iapd with Peter Murphy. We had a conversation, and still with COVID, he is kicked out to do it in April. So we either have the week of the 15th or the 20th. It'll be about a 90-minute meeting. So again, I can kind of throw out a doodle, or if we want to try to piggyback, I can't.
Well, just as I'm looking at that, Elizabeth, April, if it's a good year, you guys are going to want to get farming, so let's do it as soon as we can in April.
He wants to do it at the end of April, you know, giving a little bit with where legislation. And
Well, I thought you said the week of the 12th or the 19th.
The 15th, April 15th or April 20th, those 2 weeks. So at the very end, and we can either, we've got that 1 week, we've got the regular meeting or a cow. I don't know if we want to try to increase that or due to the field work to start a little bit later and do it on another night. I mean, he's flexible, but he will be coming up from Springfield and will be, you know, needing to spend.
Well, I'll leave it up to the farmers. I mean, we don't know what April's going to be, but what do you guys think?
Well, the earlier in April, the better the odds are that we'll be there. Boy, if it's a sunny day and it's April, I'd be hard pressed to see some of us there, I'm sure.
Let's force it on the 15th. Let's force it on the 15th.
Yeah, let's go earlier is usually better than later in April.
Yeah.
For a meeting.
Okay, so do you want to go for Monday, the 15th of April?
Yep.
Okay.
Wait, you say Monday, the
Okay.
15th?
No, it's
The
a
15th is
Thursday.
a Thursday.
I'm sorry. Hold on a second. I'm looking, let me get my calendar. I wrote notes here, and I think I wrote down the 15th and the 20th are probably our cow and our regular meeting.
Yes, that it is.
15 is a
That's
Thursday.
what I wrote down here on my notes here. So whatever that Monday,
The 12th.
12th.
yeah, the 12th.
Oh,
or
the 12th. Well, the 12th is even better. It's earlier.
Yep. Of course, if we schedule a meeting, Dave, it'll be a beautiful sunny day. I can
Yeah, you know it will.
Yeah.
So,
When
But-
would that meeting take place? In the evening as well, or during the day, or what?
Whatever you guys want to do. So he can go later in the evening.
When can he get here?
Well, he'll drive up during the day. He's going to end up spending the evening. So
The evening of Sunday evening?
yeah, so the 2 weeks that he had, let me just go back. He had the week of the 19th and the 26th. My apologies, because I was reading you the cow in the regular meeting on the 20th. So if we wanted to piggyback on the evening of the 20th with the regular meeting, we could try to work with that, or we could find another. We could.
No,
go
I'm
with-
really confused. You just,
Me too.
we were talking April 12th is what we're talking about now.
No, so let me back it up. I made an error in my notes. I had written down the 15th and the 20th. That is, I wrote down from my notes, that's our April meetings. We have an April meeting cow on the 15th, and we have our regular meeting on April 20th.
Gotcha.
Peter Murphy can come up the week of the 19th or the 26th. And so if we wanted to piggyback with efficiencies, we could try to aim on the 20th or do it any time during those 2 weeks. He can
so we
go-
could do it at the beginning of our meeting on the 20th, and then he would be able to if we start at 5 o'clock, is that early enough for him to get his done? Take him an hour and a half. That'll get us done at 6:30 with that, and then we could do our regular meeting after that.
We could start the regular meeting and postpone that to start at 7 and do him at
Okay.
5. Yes, that would work.
Okay, I'm good with that.
That's just one night done that way.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Elizabeth,
Yeah,
I did find that legal opinion, and it was on the farm leases. It was from
Future hedges.
2010, so 11 years ago. Ansel Glink looked at it and said, yeah, we couldn't do it. It's a form of a derivative and restricted from it.
yeah, thank you.
So can I ask a question about this meeting with Peter? So you're saying it's about an hour and a half. So if we're doing it prior to the meeting, are there follow-up meetings to that? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering.
What's the process? Oh, so the
Yeah.
process will be, there will be a survey that he will distribute that you'll take and return to him in advance. Then he
Oh,
will
okay.
come out, and then you'll have a 90-minute in-person, not through Zoom, in person in the boardroom, you know, when we'll meet with Peter.
What if we're not past Zoom by then?
We have to be.
He's very much hopeful that we've got to. You know, my other report on the pandemic, which will be coming up, is we anticipate Friday, the word on the street, we'll see what happens. Level 2, meaning, you know, that'll move us to 50 or less, and some other restrictions to get restaurants open and things like that. So yeah, he's optimistic. And again, they're working around the legislative schedule down in Springfield too. But so the process, 90 minutes will cover what's necessary. And of course, if there's follow-up, you know, you can always pick and call Peter on the phone. But
So we will have him at 5 o'clock, and then we'll move our board meeting to 6:30.
6:30, give yourself a break, 7, whatever you guys
7
want.
o'clock, okay.
Whenever we can get restarted, but probably 7 o'clock is probably correct.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we can aim for that and see what happens. All right, if we're done with that, we're gonna aim for April 20th, ahead of our regular meeting. So we'll see how that works out. Moves
Well,
us
John,
on-
that should be not bad because we're gonna have our cow prior to, so if there's any issues, we can bring them up on the cow.
Right, that's what I'm hoping, is that
Yeah.
we can make it so that our regular meeting could be pretty short if we've got everything worked out the week before and we don't have any issues come up between now and then. So hopefully we'll go trouble-free between now and then.
All right, let's go for it.
So, okay. If that's the case, then we're gonna move on to 5.5, which is led by Elizabeth and Ed on a possible Bison lease.
What?
The Tonkas
So
here?
this is Ed and Brad. They're gonna do not a presentation. They're gonna talk to you. There was a board summary, and we're really just directly trying to get some feedback with some options that we can move forward with. So Ed, you've got, I don't think you prepared a
Sure.
presentation.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yipper.
Excellent.
So there is a board summary that goes into the details of this particular opportunity, but I'll preface it by talking just briefly about the concept of bison on district lands. This goes back to 1986 when the district completed what in shorthand is known as the 1,000-acre prairie study. And it was the period of time when the district moved from not managing land into actively restoring it. And at that time, there was consideration of both elk and bison and whether it would be feasible to eventually have them on district land. At the time, that was not feasible. The largest district site at that time was about 600 acres. But through the years, and it has resurfaced more than once, when the Chusa Grasslands introduced bison about 5 or 6 years ago, we had inquiries from the public on whether that would happen on district land. And also our own O&A committee, Outreach and Advocacy, in 2016, brought up the concept again. So we, as a staff, have looked at it a number of times and are somewhat familiar with the requirements for bison. But what occurred over the last 2 months, beginning in December or late November, is we had an inquiry from a bison, a family farm that raises bison near Champaign, Urbana. And it came to us through a contact from the Liberty Prairie Foundation. Now, if you'll recall, we've worked with them on 2 grants that have allowed us to digitize our farm records and also to help produce the Agricultural Conservation Index. And the staff at Liberty Prairie Foundation was aware that the district had been using cattle as grassland management tool at Pleasant Valley. So they put the family in touch with us. We had a Zoom meeting, talked to them about what their operation involved in Champaign, what they were interested in pursuing with the district, and why they were interested in Northeastern Illinois, which is basically the market for bison is expanding, and this is one of the areas it's expanding in. So there was enough interest, enough good feedback on what possibly could happen there under the right circumstances that we spent a couple hours in the field at Pleasant Valley with Roeder Bison and the family, and took a look at the pasture that might be available. And again, got a lot of questions answered about how they manage the herd, what kind of fencing would be required, those kinds of issues. So we're really at a point right now where we're bringing this to you for some direction. We find it a pretty interesting idea. It fits in with our existing agricultural policy to encourage alternative and new farmers. We have the ability to do it as a small experiment on one pasture, about 68 acres in size. And we want to get some feedback from the board on how and if you would like us to pursue it. So a couple of thoughts here as we go into that discussion. We do have the ability as a district to enter into negotiations for our farm leases without directly going to bid. It's not what we normally do. We normally will bid out any available farmland, and we'll take the bids and take a look at what the best price is for the district. But on more than one occasion, mostly because it's in the programmatic interest of the district, we have waived this. A couple examples are the Future Farmers of America parcel that we leased near Marengo. That was not a bid process. Occasionally we have landlocked parcels where really the only person who can farm them because of access is the neighbor. Doesn't happen often, but once in a while we have that. And typically we don't go to bid on those. And even in our own farm program, when a lease is up, we negotiate first with our existing farmer prior to going to bid. So there is precedent for doing this if it makes sense from the district's perspective. Question one is, do we pursue bison on the Pleasant Valley site? And if the answer to that is yes, we would like you to discuss how to go about it. And we basically come up with 3 options for pursuing this further. There may be others we haven't come up with. And of course, we're always open to something different coming up that hadn't been considered. But option 1 would be to enter into direct negotiations with Roeder Bison to develop a bison grazing proposal for the 68 acres at Pleasant Valley, and then bring that back to the board for your review and discussion and a decision on whether you would want to go into that lease or not. Secondly, we could create a bison only RFP or request for proposals for the same field, in which case we would put it out to any bison producers and see if there was additional information outside the contact that we've had. Under those circumstances, we would take the RFP submittals that came in, select the one that seemed to be the best, and again, bring it to the board for authorization to move forward. And the third option is we could create a bison or cattle RFP for that field, for the 68-acre field, compare and contrast the ecological and the financial benefits from both cattle submitters and bison submitters, and then bring a recommendation to the board to go forward with one or the other. So again, there may be other options. Those are the 3 we kind of boiled it down to. So we have 2 requests. One is, do we pursue bison? And 2 is, if so, how would you like us to go about that?
And I have a question on your narrative. You did say, or the narrative said, that the long-term goal is sustainable grazing operation. Define sustainable for me, please.
Sure. I think some of the board members who have been here for some time probably are familiar with the fact that we've had a grazing operation at portions of Pleasant Valley for over a decade. First with the original seller of the property, and then the last couple of years with various other farm operators. And we're utilizing the grazing of cattle in a quick rotation to create grassland bird structure. So by sustainable, we're not just talking about an operation that is good for the land in terms of its impact, and no impact to the vegetation beyond the impact when the cattle are on there and then we move them off have them moved off quickly enough so there isn't damage to those pastures. But we also are using that same process to manage for different height structures and densities in the grass vegetation for grassland birds. So in this case, that's what we mean by a sustainable grazing operation there.
So if you did an RFP, would you require paddocking and then rotational grazing, or?
So, and I've asked Brad to attend tonight because he's done the lion's share of the work on our initial RFP for Pleasant Valley, which if you can try to put your mind back before COVID existed, we had authorization to try to put a long-term cattle grazing operation at Pleasant Valley, and the request for proposals were going out just as the district went into the first COVID isolation. So we pulled back and just did simple year-long leases there to make sure the district is getting income. And we are back to renting 2 of those pastures for a year. And this one coincided with approval from the board to go ahead and renegotiate those existing leases for another year. So that is the site and that is the process. It would, what we would bring back to you would include, we believe, all the details on how that operation would work. And I guess at this point, I would ask Brad if you would like to, comment. Adam Rex as well is here in the Natural Resource Department, and Adam is familiar with the bison operation at Nachusa. He worked there previously coming to the district. So do you guys want to add anything possibly to help answer Dave's question, or may add things that I missed?
Yeah, just a few details, and Ed covered it pretty well. The big thing is there's mob grazing, there's rotational grazing, there's permanent grazing, and what we've done and what we found works really well with cattle is what I would call limited grazing, where we've actually defined the terms of the grazing lease to come in May and move all the cows off by the end of October. That way they're not wintering, they're not bringing in hay. And really the way I look at it is we're using cows, it could be bison, to do that management. So we are getting paid, but they're also, the farmers are doing all the work, they're managing that grassland. We're just working with them on the stocking rate. And so what's interesting about the Pleasant Valley that we're already pastured is there's restored prairie and there's just regular cool season pasture grass. And I went out there several times. We actually monitor birds, but I was also monitoring the plants out there. And we had phenomenal, we've actually gone away from planting big blue stem, Indian grass and switchgrass because they don't get grazed. We can actually go back to that if they are allowed to be grazed, because we don't have, bison, we don't have cattle grazing all of our pastures. So we've made management approaches over the last 20 years because of the lack of grazers. So they're a major component of tall grass prairie management. We're lacking them almost everywhere. So we would like to have some kind of grazer. And then it's really, this is why it is an important board decision, is how important is it to have bison? We know we can do the cattle. There would be probably some additional costs with fencing, certainly safety and liability. Those are all things that are, probably the detailed questions if you have them. But it's a cool thing. I know the previous boards got all excited when we talked about bison. So, wherever you guys are at is fine. But I think we can make it happen, but we definitely need some direction.
Well, I have one question. So environmentally, are bison different than cattle in the way that they graze? Or, I mean, is there an advantage to the district having bison versus cattle?
If you read the literature and if you listen to the bison people, there is, and it's a slight difference. It's a little bit more in the grasses. They're not as picky. I don't know if you or I, just looking at the pasture from just walking in, would be able to tell, but people who have studied it have noted there is a difference. And then, bison are a little bit harder on the landscape. They'll make the wallows and things like that. And maybe Adam, you could jump in, because I've gone down, actually Adam and I both went down to Nachusa to look at the bison herd there and what they do. And they have GPS monitors on those bison. They're tracking what they're eating. I mean, there is a slight difference. I'll just leave it at that. There is some differences.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? On 68 acres, how many bison can you put on there so they don't graze it down before they leave?
So the whole idea is this would be a long-term lease and they would start small. They have an operation down in Urbana. They would bring animals up. They're only looking at 1 bison per 3 acres, and that's the rate we're actually going with.
Okay.
So part of the whole proposal, though, is to take out some existing row crop, and this would be a transition over a period of years, and we would add to that. So right now we have a total of about 260, I believe, maybe there's a few more acres of pasture in the whole Pleasant Valley complex, but we also have row crop ground there. So we would convert row crop ground to pasture over the years as needed.
There you go.
And one reason why starting out small is appealing is it allows us to compare directly cattle grazing with bison grazing, because we'll have both animals on that parcel. So we'll be able to look at them side by side. Also, and I think you brought it up, if we run this first pasture for a few years and determine, you know what, this is not in the best interest of the district, we haven't converted large amounts of that land into bison grazing. So it's an opportunity to really take a look at it on a small scale and see if it works.
I agree, smaller to start.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Pat.
What about fencing? Fencing's not cheap.
Right.
You gotta have a pretty good fence for them.
You're absolutely right. So, and that's the whole thing is, the district can either build the fence, or we can have the farmer or the rancher build the fence and incorporate that into the cost of the lease. And I can tell you right now, the fencing is not adequate there for cattle. I mean, we have a farmer who's done it the last couple of years, and it needs to be improved. So we're at the point where a new fence is going to be built. Is it going to be a bison fence or a cattle fence? The big thing they do with the bison, and this is another management approach, is they put in young animals, no more than 3 years old. Once bison get older, they get ornery, they get harder to handle. So this would be a young bison, they grow them for a year and then move them out. So, but they use electric as well, electric and a wire fence. So 2 types of fencing to secure them.
And Pat, to build on your question, those costs and who would bear them and how they would be worked would be part of the details we would bring back to the board if we were to move forward on it and say, here's what we worked out. What do you think?
Okay, then my last
Pat.
question is, so you said you're gonna maybe thinking 1 bison for 3 acres to start out with. As far as isn't that stuff, don't you hay it now? Don't they cut that once a year now when you don't have anything over there? Or is that, you don't do that on these pastures?
No, so Pleasant Valley, we actually have 2 paddocks. One is closer to, the eastern paddock is closer to our construction shop, and the west one is behind the old Fitzgerald buildings, and it's way back. And so we actually have the east pasture already rented. So that one's already taken care of for this year. But the west pasture behind the buildings, and that is actually, it comes up, there's a lane, and there's about 9 acres of pasture around the buildings. And between that is where there's row crop that we could add on to over the years, but it's back along the Kishwaukee, the existing 68 acres that Ed referred to.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's very interesting. I think there are a lot of questions. It seemed like option 3, asking for RFPs for both bison and cattle, would allow us to compare some of the aspects of this, including, cost sharing or cost to the district versus the revenue. Is there more revenue in bison, or is it the same as cattle? I think that RFP, someone needs to look at the liability issue and be sure that our policy covers bison beyond just the ordinary, farm animals that might be covered. So I would support getting more information, and I think a formal RFP that covers all these aspects of cost and potential revenue and liability and personnel, who's going to be responsible for monitoring the health and well-being of the animals, 365 days a year. So that would be the direction I would go. It sounds, very interesting, but there's still some education that I need.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill. And I have a comment too, Ed. As we learned with over there at the Peachin Farm when we were gonna do some grazing there, one of the things we ran into was the fact that we were gonna rent to somebody outside the county, which I don't have a real issue with, other than the fact that I think we need to have the bidding process so that anyone can bid and not just one farm. Because if we don't open it up to everyone in this county, we could run into if we're going to ask somebody from this county not to run it and give it to somebody outside the county without a bid, I think we'll run into some headwinds.
Yeah, John, that's why I was thinking, I'm sorry, Bill, but I think we have enough cattle in McHenry County, and I was chair of the O&A when we got all excited about buffalo, so I'm still excited about buffalo. So I'd like to do a bison only RFP on that 68 acres or 67 acres.
I was just going to jump in because I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead, Lynn, that's fine.
Oh, no, because I was actually kind of thinking along the same lines as Bill is if we had originally said, let's go out for RFP prior to COVID, and that was the direction we were going in. I just read that again this afternoon, thinking that, well, if that was what we were thinking, maybe that's a better way to go. But listening to the conversation today a little bit, one, we already do cattle. So Dave, I agree with you. So if we did go for RFQ or RFP, maybe focus on the bison so that we can long-term compare between what we've already been doing with cattle and what is possible with bison. But if we look at this particular parcel at 68 acres, it's really more of a test parcel, right? And so this isn't the end all. Maybe it's an opportunity to work with the farmer who's already been presenting this idea, not for the, in this smaller, more controlled setting to see where we're at. And then to the extent that we have something viable, then go out for RFP later, or how do you say it? Later. So I'm not committed either way. I'm not really trying to say we go in one direction. It was just something I thought about as I've been listening to the discussion this evening.
The one comment I would make, Lynn, is if someone is going to commit, if it's a bison person, they're going to want a long-term lease and they're going to want to expand the operation. So we are going to start small, but it would be with the purpose in mind to expand. So, I mean, that's why the RFP, and it's great that you guys are talking about it, because it does have to be decided, hey, which way are we going to go? And then we can make it work. Because the likelihood that bison wouldn't necessarily, because of the upfront cost, it might not bring in as much upfront, but then maybe in the long term, it's going to bring in more because there's a higher value product. So that's the challenge is to figure out how we want to package the whole thing. And that's why it's an important question for the board.
Yeah, Brad, I do agree, but I'm big into this long-term sustainability, including not just the soil and the crop, but habitat.
Right.
So do they, is it the same thing when you're talking about the cattle? It was there for May through October. I mean, that's the same thing with the bison, right? They bring them in and then they take them out, or how is that working?
When we've had our discussions with them, they would keep them year round. So they would bring in hay. Okay. So again, we know that cattle, if they're overgrazed, they cause a problem. We were not going to let that happen. So then this is all new, but what we've talked to them is they would want to leave them. I mean, there is transport costs, so they would want to minimize those. So, they would stay year round, but they would bring in hay during the winter.
They're a lot harder to load than cattle. So you're not going to be handling all. You're not going to want to haul them all around. That's a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
There is one thing I neglected to add, and I probably should have, and that is one of the questions we asked them, both in the phone interview and when we had them in the field, is the relationship of bison to public programs. Because whether in either case, whether we said we didn't want any public programs or we said we did, once you have bison out there, the public will find them.
Yes,
they
will.
And they'll be curious about them.
Yes,
so the good news was that they give tours on their existing farmland of bison now because there is a public interest in them. So those types, as Bill noted, those types of liabilities and how something like that might work would be part of what we would try to put together in an RFP package.
Hey Ed, I was going to jump in and just say, sorry, my camera doesn't work right now. This is Adam. My friend Cody, who works in the Chusa area, he basically runs the Bison program out there. I was speaking to him the other day and he said, you know, because I told him we were going to be talking about this at the board meeting. And he said, you know, if anybody wants to tour anytime, just let me know and then get you in contact with him, or we can go out there and just, you know, he'll give us a tour of their corral, whatever we want to see, talk to them what they went through. It took them 5 years to get them. I mean, they own them themselves, so it's a little different operation than what we would have, but just to see what all goes into it, because it is quite a bit. So yeah, and you know, not that the farmer that we would get would do it the same way they did it, but at least you give an idea of what, you know, what you need, because their operation is, you know, top of the line, everything, safety, all that kind of thing, education. So yeah, it's a good opportunity to see a place that's not very far away.
Thanks for that offer, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to do that sometime.
I would
I
too,
got
but
one
not
more
right now
question.
during COVID.
Yeah.
So this, you're talking, this farm's from Champaign, as you're saying?
Yes.
Where's the farm? Yeah. What seems
Where's
to me,
the farm that Adam was talking about?
Nachusa is in Ogle County. It actually straddles a couple counties, but it's probably, what, Adam, about 80 minutes, 70 minutes away?
Right. It wouldn't be bad for any of
Yeah,
us to
something
drive
like
there. Yeah, we could set something up that way.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be real easy, just a phone call. Yeah, a couple
Excellent.
days.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yep, no problem.
Well, we'll see if we can set something up there. I still think that when we put this out to bid, whether it's all bison, just bidding bison or cattle, we're gonna have to put it out to everybody. And but my question is, if we put something out for bid, are we always obligated to take the best or the most money bid, or can we, are other factors able to put into that, or how are we gonna write that up?
Well, the request for proposal would be the first step, which would basically, we would put together the proposal and ask the submitters how they would handle particular aspects of the program. And then the board would select whichever RFP they believe is the one that is most advantageous for the district. And at that point, we would go into the negotiating process. At least that's the way that we handled it for the proposal for Peach.
And it's not impossible. It's not impossible to reject all proposals, right?
No, you can reject any or all.
Sure.
Well, I guess I'll back off and just do an RFP and see who responds.
Well, an RFP, but then you need to decide, is it a duality of cattle and bison, either or strictly bison? Because I think that all depends on the, you know, the work.
Maybe Bill and I need to arm wrestle.
Well, there's one thing about that, Dave.
You know, I don't have enough information, but if, in other words, what should I say? The district already leases cattle grazing. So you have some idea of what that involves. And frankly, I would be curious to know if there's a difference, and maybe we could do that if you put the RFP for bison and you get back a proposal, and when we look at it, the costs to run the bison outweigh the aesthetics of having the bison, and we would be equally reimbursed with cattle. That would, you know, to me, direct us to cattle from the point of view of, well, you know, we're looking for revenue. On the other hand, if the issue is the more aesthetic one of, well, boy, wouldn't it be neat to have bison out there and we can generate some revenue by tours and things like that. Well, in other words, you know, why not? So I'm not going to be bent out of shape how we take this next step, whether it be bison only or bison versus cattle, looking at pieces of paper with projections and numbers and things like that. Or if Ed and company feel they already know what cattle involve, then let's just ask for some bison proposals and we can sort that out internally if we see advantages or disadvantages. I will say it again, I think you have to be sure that your liability coverage is there, because as Linda said, this is going to attract kids and crazy adults who, you know, think, oh boy, I got to get a close-up picture of a bison. And when their tail goes up and they, you know, charge off at you, it's a serious matter. So, you know, check out the liability question as we go along.
Thanks for that, Bill. So I would like to see, is there consensus for a bison only RFP?
Yeah, I would like to just add one thing. I do think that I would like to have them discuss or add in that educational component, because I think if there are opportunities in a controlled setting for people to come and actually visit, you know, it's going to draw attention anyway. In addition to liability issues and concerns and protections, I'd like to see them address what they would add in for an educational component as well.
Yeah, that'd be a tough one because those fields are nowhere near a road.
No, they're not. It's not able to. Okay, no, that's fine.
Won't be easy anyway, but.
It won't be easy. All right. Well, maybe down the line.
But I agree, education, if we can do education, that'd be fine with me too.
Anyone else have a comment? Dave is for a bison only. Is that the consensus of other trustees, or is there? I guess I'm not quite there. Other than that, I think it'd be neat to have bison there. I'm just somewhat worried about if we since we can go through an RFP with everything and then we can choose amongst them, we can reject whatever, and it doesn't have to be just on the money part of it. I'd like to, I'm afraid that if we shut out everybody in McHenry County, that we're gonna run into the same thing we ran into over at Peachin. And I don't want to go through another meeting like that. I don't think the staff does either. So I would like to have it so if we open it up and if and then the board can look at it, and if there's only a slight difference between bison and cattle, we can choose the bison or whatever, but I don't want to get us in a position where we have a meeting like that last one. So that's the only issue I have.
But John, you're for a bison cattle RFP.
Right, just because I want to leave it open to as many people as possible, so we're not. I'd love to see the bison in there, but I also know that that's probably going to shut out most of the people that are in McHenry County that do grazing, and they are the taxpayers in this county, and I'd like to make it so they at least have an opportunity in this. Although I can tell that the board would probably somewhat favor a bison lease, because it'd be something we'd be interested in studying. It'd be something that would be different than what we do. So I have a feeling if the cattle came in with just a couple dollars more than the bison over a long term, the board would probably choose the bison, but I don't want to eliminate taxpayers and neighbors right off the bat.
Okay, John, I will back off, and I will agree with you and Bill, but then the long-term sustainability is, for me, the criteria that I would pick, right? The money.
Right, and I understand that, and the people that are bidding this have to realize that the board is looking for something, at least some of the board is looking for something different here, and it isn't going to be just dollars and cents.
Okay, I'll agree with option 3.
I will too.
Me too.
Pat, and how about Chris? I saw you for a second there on my screen.
Yeah,
Linda?
I go
Okay.
on option 3 also for both.
Okay.
I just had a quick questions, if I can, Elizabeth.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Just to raise my hand.
We'll let you be involved in this.
I just have some different thoughts that I haven't teed in here on. So two things that come to mind as we bring up the property in Cary. One, obviously, both properties were in a type of farming ag use, and we had neighbor issues because of close and proximity. So is there any concerns of an area that we need to take a look or be aware of? And then the other question is on the, do we know if there's any bison farmers that are into bison currently in McHenry County?
I was
I
just
know.
looking. I was just looking. I don't see any. Where was the? Go ahead, Dave.
We do have one that I know of. It's near Coral Woods, but it's a very small herd.
They have only 2 or 3 head though, don't they, Ed?
Right. It's
Yeah,
very
I know.
small.
I know those people. I don't think they just have a couple just for the fun of it. That's not really a part of their business. They're very large landscapers actually.
But Elizabeth, to answer your question, the difference between the Pitchin farm with all those homes right on one side and Fitzgerald parts, Fitzgerald's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, this is a good spot to put this.
Yeah, there's nothing south until you get to Hemmingson Road, and then McHugh. I forget which one it is.
McHugh.
I thought that was the primary issue with Peachin. I mean, I'm sure there were other issues as well, but I think
Fitzgerald's out in the middle of nowhere.
This would be a much better spot. That's for sure. And but we did have some people raise the issue of the fact that he wasn't from McHenry County, but I don't know.
I agree with option 3. That sounds like we got consensus on that.
Okay. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, very interesting. And as far as setting up a time to go, I know with COVID, we probably can't all ride together, but are we interested in trying to set up a date to go out there and look at the offer that we've had?
I have a car with plenty of gas. I can go whenever you say.
Yeah. Me too. I'm in.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll see if we can set something up there. Okay. Thank you. All right, we're gonna
Thank
move
you.
on.
Thank you for the direction. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Ed and staff. Okay, that's going to bring us to Elizabeth. You have an executive director's report.
I do. I have a few items, and so I'll just go through these. With COVID, we are in our separation stage, which means programs have been reinitiated. That started after the new year for groups of 10 and under, and they are outside, and those have been taking place. We're all making preparations for special events. Festival of Sugar Maples will be in March, and so planning for pre-registration and getting that all in order. Our campgrounds are back open, and our visitor centers at this point still remain closed. Like I said before, we anticipate that there will be a notification of a movement by the governor to a level 2. So our pandemic group will meet again next week and have a discussion about opening of visitor centers and all of that. So again, we're maintaining that. We're also, obviously, as vaccines are going, John Kramer and Jenny Hyder have been working with the county to ensure that our staff are on the list as essential workers and to be able to get in line and queue for vaccination. So we're working through that. And but all is going well. We continue to do well as we navigate that. The next item I have was snowmobile trail request. As you recall, back in December, trustees received correspondence, as did I, from a Mr. Thompson. And I did have a telephone call with him. We had a nice conversation. I did share with him, that we have our agreements with the Snowmobile Association clubs for use, and due to COVID and how our planning process goes, is it takes a while for us to obviously We'll need to assess the different trails that are being requested to see if that's something that we can do. So staff has put that on their work to do list. Seasonality wise, right now there's snow on the ground, but we're reviewing certain things that we do know about areas. If areas are nature preserve, they're in a particular high quality area, and then we'll continue to evaluate that. But we'll report back to you later on this year. And hope to have some type of response before the next set of renewals into the ongoing year. Any questions on that?
No, if I remember correctly, it was all around Queen Anne Prairie, wasn't it?
Yeah, east of Queen Anne, between Avang Road South and Allendale.
Okay, good deal.
Okay, so that's where that stands. Let's see, the other update I had for you was with the Hebron Trail crossing. As you probably recall, on that master project list, it was one of those areas we put in for a grant to receive an RTP grant. Amy Peters, and I believe I did see her out there in our grouping. She had met with a meeting with the railroad and the Southwestern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. And they are not going to allow any type of arrangement to cross those tracks. So we're going to have to find another solution. And so they'll be meeting with engineers and information. And after that gets kind of where that is, and we get word on the grant, then we'll circle back and have a meeting with the township just to keep them apprised. But no, there's a no-go.
So they had flat out said you're not crossing that railroad.
Not happening.
Not happening.
That question's been asked and answered, and it's a definitive no.
So what's SWWRPC? What's they got to do with it? I see on the agenda here, Southwestern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
What
Amy,
do they have to do with it?
Can you unmute and is she there?
Oh, she's unmuted.
She's unmuted.
Hey, Amy.
I certainly can't tell you what they stand for. Right, it's like 10 letters. They're just a larger group that own more than or are responsible for more than just that line.
Oh, okay.
And so we had a nice conversation, but just a little bit of a tweak and the clarification is that we asked if we could use their service road. And that's what they said. They can't allow us to do the actual crossing if it's at a road or an overpass or an underpass. Of course, they have to consider that, and that's what we'll still move forward with. But it wasn't that they said, no, you can't cross our tracks. It was the question that we posed to them, which made the most sense and economical and efficient at the time, was just to ask, there is that service road. Can we have an easement, a permanent easement on it for, improving it for trail? And that's what they said no to.
Are people already using that though, Amy? Is that what people use anyway? When they walk that or bike on it?
Well, yes, but we have clearly on both ends of our trail put up the appropriate signage, saying this trail ends. I mean, we have trail ends, turn around, this is private property. So on both ends, yes. And then at that meeting, we did ask, is there anything stronger from, again, we can't do anything outside of district property. And so
right.
Everything that we can. I asked if there was anything on their part or, that they wanted to do or needed to do or felt that was, important for the safety of it. And they said no. So the status quo from their standpoint of signage or barricades or that sort of thing.
So people are going around those signs or going past those signs and using their service road is what people do.
Correct.
Right. Because I know I had a couple of people complain to me that our trail wasn't very good there. So I went out and hiked it myself and went out and hiked it myself, and then I found out that we didn't own it, and I explained to them, well, we don't keep it up because it's not ours. So but anyway, but yeah, it looks like it's ours, but it isn't. So, okay.
So yeah, it's over, right? And thank you for the clarification. So we can go over, but that's going to be costly. And so you're looking for another way to alignment, right, Amy?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Again, so when you come to a road and a railroad crossing, that's when, you know, the different groups come in, the ICC or this Wisconsin, right? They have to consider or evaluate, you know, how to cross, because obviously you can't tell people not to ride their bike on a road, right?
Right.
So that's where we're, you have to then have, sort of this third party that comes in and says, hey, wait a minute, we got to figure this out from a crossing standpoint. But obviously they have, regulations and we can understand, right? They don't want anybody getting hurt and that sort of thing. So we just need to follow them. But we just thought, yeah, it was there, it was existing, let's ask. I don't know that it's been asked, so let's do it and let's ask it current so that we know we can start taking these things off of the table, right? So that we know where to focus our attention on how to actually, what are the solutions that are viable and we can, move forward with investigating.
Right. Well, that would have been the easiest way to take care of it, but
yeah. We thought so too.
I'm kind of surprised that they don't want to figure out a way to do that, because I think there's people that are actually crossing and walking on the, I've had a couple of people tell me that they actually went where it goes bad, if it's wet, they get on the track and actually walk the track till they get to the road, which sounds much worse.
Terrible, right? But you're right. But again, we have the signs and yeah, it's, it is hard because you can't, you wish you could stop them, but you can't stop them. Aside from having them just completely pull out that service drive,
right.
Or sections of the trail, I don't know, but we're working on it. I did, we've got an engineer that's helping us come up with some of, helping us make some current cost estimates of options. So stay tuned. We'll keep working on it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
I appreciate that. And then the last thing I had, well, two things. Richmond Township Road District. So there was a letter, and I did forward that on to the Board of Trustees. I did speak with the Road District Commissioner, Chris Gummins. So we're going to set up a meeting. I was looking for a trustee to accompany me. And again, I don't, Trustee Dom, I don't know if this is something that you're agreeable to assist with since you're in the area. If you would.
We can.
And then just to have a phone call or a Zoom meeting or whatever, or an in-person, whatever we need to do. They're looking to, they're limited, they're landlocked. They're looking for some storage. They use a cold storage. So I asked that they give us some square footage, exactly what they're looking to do. They're also looking for some additional land because they're also involved with the cemetery. And so again, I think there's a lot of questions that we need to assess and determine. But if you would,
cemetery at that corner, Elizabeth?
Well, no, they're just looking for land. I think we're going to need to have to work through exactly what is on their wish list, what they'd like to do. Do we have anything that could, assist them? We may not. They're looking potentially maybe for a trade of land. The road that comes in off of 31 into the center of Glacial Park is currently a township road. One thought would be that they transfer that 100% to the district in lieu and get something else in exchange for that. That was shared. So I think there's just, let's get things out on the table, understand where things are and see what.
Sounds good.
If we have anything that can work or not. So thank you, Trustee Dom, if you would do that, if everybody's good with that.
Sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
That. And then just on the historic stabilization, which is not on the list, and then I'll talk about the conference. Since we met in December, there's been some activity. Obviously in the newspaper, there was an article, which we talked about the other night with the McConnell. Rami Lopat, who had prepared a letter and had sent that on to the board to be included. She did follow up and was inquiring, and I believe she's spoken with Director Kramer as well, just with some options. She would like to have a continued conversation of leasing of land or looking at some other options that they could assist as a private group to help with restoring. And I, ultimately shared that we haven't made a final decision on what the status of that is, but of course we're open for any type of partnerships and assistance. So I throw that out there. Also, we were receiving information on reviewing of the roof by a third party through the McHenry County Historical Society. Kurt Bacalka had passed on information, as you recall. So Director Kramer is reaching out and getting information so we can have more input in assessment. And then lastly, I know Steve Greeley, who sits on the Historic Preservation Commission at the county, had also advanced on information on the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, as a funding source. So there's a lot of things coming at us. We're working through triaging all this information here. I think what's important for the board, and as we plan future meetings, at the December 22nd meeting, we left a variety of options, and we probably need to revisit where the board is on a variety of those things so we can figure out what the priorities are. So I don't know if that's a February, March. I'll leave that just to follow back up, because that'll help us how much time and energy do we need to reprioritize in our work plan for the year ahead or so, and what's on our strategic plan. And then lastly, I had the Ipra Ipd Conference, which is January 28th, 29th, and 30th. Tomorrow is the last day for early bird registration. It's all virtual. The Iapd board meeting is on the Saturday. If any trustees are interested, let me know, because we don't want to pay for non-early bird. So if you have any
Elizabeth, I got to be honest with you. I just couldn't sit here for that long, so I probably will not be participating.
Yeah, so that's fine. Yeah. They expect registration to be down slightly due to it being virtual. So, and that's all I have for my report.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to bring forth? Any trustees have any other subjects? Staff, anyone? Okay, with that, if there's no one, we have time for public comments too. Anybody from else that would like to make a comment? I can't see anybody. Is there anybody out there?
I don't see anything either.
Okay, then I could use a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay, Bill has makes a motion for us to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Chris?
Yes, I'll
have a second. We'll make a motion made and seconded. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Brandt,
Yes.
Trustee Fritz,
Yes.
Trustee Campbell,
Yes.
Trustee Thomas,
Oh, she's muted.
I muted, my dog was barking. Sorry. Yes.
it's okay. Trustee Dom,
Yes.
Trustee Cook,
Yes.
and Trustee Henning.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Have a good weekend, everybody. See you Tuesday.
Yep. See you
You bet.
Tuesday.
Yep, bye.
Bye.